Bounce this off of Fox News contributors Gary B. Smith and Jessica Tarlow and Independent Women Forum Hadley Heath Manning. Hadley, what's remarkable here is the tax cuts have even gotten independents, Democrats more on board. That they were predisposed to be critical of this, and now, of course, liking this, or at least liking a lot more than they did. And yet it's not benefited, judging by some of these polls, Republicans for the midterm election. What's happening here, you think?
Well, first, I think reality set in. There's a lot of demagoguery and expectations, exaggerations even about what policy will do in the future. But as we've seen so many bonuses and increases in pay, investments in workforce, and as the new withholding tables from the IRS became reality, so many Americans saw that money in their paychecks and they said, hey, I like this tax break. On the other hand, tax breaks and the tax reform package aren't the only issue that's out there. Republicans are going to have to deal with a wide variety of issues when it comes to this midterm election. But I believe ultimately the tax reform package, that's their major signature achievement in Congress and with this White House legislatively. So they should get credit for that. That's one thing that will work on their side.
They hope, right? I mean, Gary, then you have the gyrations of the stock market, not, exclusively the fault of those tax cuts and all, but ironically better than expected economic news. It's backing up interest rates, a case of good news being bad news. Whatever it is, it's just another concern. I mean, even if you're not directly invested in the markets, right? What's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, you got the whole, the only flaw in Trump's economic policy, I think, has come up, this whole, tariffs and the trade war. But hopefully offsetting that, and I think the problem for the Republicans is they're not selling it enough, are these great tax cuts. I think they should make them permanent. Hopefully in the future they'll make a flat tax. It puts the government on a budget, which I think is good. And if Republicans just can dispel the left's notion that that big government is some benevolent Wizard of Oz that can bestow all these wishes on people, if only we gave them more money, which is really just the opposite of reality, I think it'd be a good thing. So if Trump got off the whole trade war thing and the Republicans just kept pushing how great this tax cut is, I think things would be a lot rosier right now.
Jessica, with some of your liberal friends, that position on trade is actually quite popular, right?
It is some of my more liberal friends, but I hang more with the moderates,
really?
Who are not huge fans of this. I think there are good arguments on both sides.
But the argument is that this actually might improve the president's fortunes with independents and Democrats who've always looked at trade deals with some question.
Well, maybe those who, the Trumpocrats, right? The people who were for Bernie Sanders and then went for him. But there are a number of union folks. I think it's the leader of the steel union who actually doesn't like this and is worried about what's going to happen to the cost of products that are made here. And we've been talking about that a lot. That's what Scott Walker has said, that when the price goes up, that doesn't create more jobs and it creates bad messaging.
You're quoting Scott Walker to make your point?
He tweeted something kind of sensible. So I think it was a tweet. Anyway, he said it. So I think you can make the argument on both sides there, but I agree with Gary B. that this wasn't the right thing to do right now. When you do have a tax cut that is growing in popularity, even amongst moderates, independents, Democrats, that you should have just stayed and focused on that and gotten through the midterms with that messaging. And I actually believe that Donald Trump is the best messenger of all of the Republicans about what the tax cut does. Because the Republicans, the people in Congress and Senate kind of get into the weeds about these things instead of just saying there's more money in your pocket.
They don't know how to sell it. You're quite right about that. Hadley, what I'm wondering about, sometimes we make a big deal of what's the latest sentiment gauge right now. If you went on those sentiment gauges going into the 2016 election, you'd never have Donald Trump winning. So is there something maybe Republicans can cling to that is going on beneath the surface of more of a positive response as people start to notice in their checks? A good many have had a chance to see that now, maybe more to come. But is that going to move the dial much midterm, or what would it take to change that?
I think a strong economy is always on the side of incumbent parties. It's always on the side of an incumbent president. And so not just focusing on the stock market, but also focusing on some of our economic indicators in terms of our labor market, in terms of wages, in terms of how American consumers are feeling about the economy. Those things look good for the White House. They look good for Republicans. Sticking with that strong economic message, I think that's where their best bet lies.
Gary, if you had to handicap that economy and when things are going, forget the markets because they've been a little volatile of late. Maybe that's the reality now. How does this play out the rest of the year?
Well, I think if, building on Hadley's points, I think if the Republicans kind of compare and contrast across the major indicators that matter to most people. One, are you more likely to have a job now or under the Obama years? It's now. Are you more likely to be making more money now or during the Obama years? Now. Are you more likely to have more money in the stock market now or in the Obama years? Now. And is your house worth more now versus the previous 8 years? That's what people really care about. And that's how I think they're going to vote. If Trump can just get past some of the silliness that he comes up with every once in a while, I think the Republicans, the economy, and the market are going to do terrific.
The only other thing to mention just real fast is that there are so many Democrats interested in running for president. I think about 3,000.
Yeah.
So
roughly
does
speaking.
that dilute the message here? It's a different phenomenon from the midterm, I grant you, but that the party doesn't know, that is Democrats as an aggregate don't know what voice to use here.
Well, we certainly shouldn't be using the crumbs voice of any of this. I think that the Democrats who are running in red states know how to do this. If you look at how Joe Manchin talks about this, Joe Donnelly, Claire McCaskill, Heidi Heitkamp, the people who actually will stand next to President Trump when it is something worth standing next to him about to talk about economic growth, look to those people, because that's what happened. We've lost 1,000 seats in the last decade or so, Democrats. The map lit up red. So there's something that we need to be doing better. And when people are open to voting for a Republican, you should talk to them as if Republicans are not anathema and the end of the world, but just argue why Democrat policies would be better. I wanted to add to the discussion, though, that history is what's going on here. If you look at how cycles work with midterm elections, this isn't really necessarily about how is the economy doing or healthcare policy or are we building a wall or not. This is just what happens, and it's time for a change.
You're right.
So
it does happen
that's a factor.
The question is, does the party ownership of any of these houses go up for grabs? Thank you very, very